And we're live. Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well wherever you are. Happy holidays. I know a lot of people are really busy right now. All the more reason, though, to listen to this podcast because we have two really special people. They're actually a couple. Dr. John Batson and Alice Batson both have amazing backgrounds. They're, like many people I talk to, involved in the stand-up paddle world in so many ways. They are racers themselves. They run an amazing race in Hilton Head, South Carolina, where they're based. But boy, between the nutrition and the physical, I think they're going to have so much to share with us. And during the holidays, you know, staying healthy is important on so many levels. The New Year's are right around the corner, and I know a lot of people are making resolutions. So I think a really good time to be talking to these two people who have just extensive knowledge in the whole area of health. No, we are going to try having both of them, I think, split screen. So we'll see if we can get this to work. It's always interesting playing with and seeing what we have going on. Hi, Adrian. Good to see you, and Lawrence. Christy, appreciate it. There's Alice. We're going to start with Alice. AP Batson is her Instagram. And there's Jammer MD. Is that how you say it, John? Not sure. Let's see if we get them both. They're both there. It worked. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. And we can hear you. Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for joining. I know it's so close to big holiday things going on, and John just finished work and just wrapped things up. You said you usually run late, so probably, what, you have a client leave like 2 minutes ago? Had to move them along.
Right.
Well, we have so much to talk about, and I'm excited. I think I don't know if you heard the introduction. What a great time of the year to be talking about health. It's always a great time to talk about it, but the holidays bring up a lot of health things for people. It's winter. It's also almost New Year's and New Year's resolutions. Now, we're lucky to live in a place where we can paddle year round. Not everybody is, but we know we have lots of stand-up paddle friends who still do other things to stay in shape and to eat well and all of those things. But first, let's talk about stand-up paddling. And you both have water backgrounds, different sports, right? Alice, you were a swimmer, and I know you have multiple sports, so it's not just swimming, but you were a Division I swimmer. And John, you were a windsurfer, and big time. I didn't realize an old picture I saw, wait, that's John in there with my friend Jen Fuller,
Right.
who's another great California stand-up paddler. So tell us about your water stories. Alice, you want to start?
Yeah, well, I started with swimming, which is mostly indoors. And in college, I actually was able to swim outdoors at Florida State, which was awesome. They have an indoor pool now. But I've always loved the ocean and the beach. And I think, once John and I started dating, he got me on a surfboard and a wakeboard, and we got into kiteboarding. And then most recently, we've gotten into stand-up paddleboarding, and it's been a lot of fun.
Great.
Our first date, kayak. Don't forget that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and kayak. You pretty much hit like almost every watercraft, huh?
Yeah.
What a great first date. Good job, John.
It was
So
a test.
windsurfing, was that a family sport for you, John?
No, not at all. My mom, I think as a single mom, was just dropping me off at summer camps trying to figure out what to do with me while she worked. And I literally went kicking and screaming into this windsurfing class, and turned out I really enjoyed it. And the guy that was teaching me windsurfing, Mike Overton, he ended up being a very, very close friend, almost like a father to me. And I worked for him many, many years after the fact. And he now is one of our sponsors for the paddle race. So it's all come full circle. So.
Wow, great. So it sounds like are you originally from Hilton Head? You've been there a long time?
Pretty much. When I was very young, my parents got divorced and my mom moved down to Hilton Head to start a real estate career. And so since then, I've kind of loved the water as I got more into windsurfing. Mike shifted his business more to kayaking and coastal ecology as windsurfing kind of died in popularity. So it was good for me. I was learning more biology stuff and getting into marine biology right when kayaking became popular. And it just allowed me to see some of Hilton Head that we never saw before up in the marsh. And so that's kind of how that evolved. And then later on, when we moved back down, Alice and I were then together, and stand-up paddleboarding became kind of the thing to learn. So we got out there and tried that together.
That's great. Well, true lovers of the water. And I mean, we're going to talk about other kinds of health, but I have saltwater heels shirt on,
Yeah.
everything, because I truly believe the water is healing in so many levels. And now we know mentally too, as well as the physical, spiritual, the whole thing. But you both come from water background, you're stand-up paddlers, you're really good racers. You both were at Carolina Cup recently. I think, John, you said that was your first race too, some years ago, 2017. But boy, did we have some tough conditions this past year. And the pictures we used, I think, in the little promo, I think those were both from the recent race, weren't they? The water looked pretty choppy.
Yeah. The one of Alice was from our race. We had a little wind our first year doing it down here in Hilton Head as well. But yeah, Carolina Cup was a challenge this year for sure.
Well, yeah, congratulations both. That was, I mean, it was a big decision whether to even do it. I know I stepped down a level in which race I did and everything. So, John, you still went for the long one, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
And you did well.
Sort of. that was a tough one. But yeah, I mean, that was in many levels a challenge, just, obviously being choppy and cold, and the current was tough. I think it was a really big moon cycle. And so I know when we looked at our GPS after the fact, we were going over areas that were land, normally. So
yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, I've talked now to Danny Ching, who ended up winning it, and such an interesting race. I mean, I didn't get down low enough on that second bridge and hit my head, and thought I might have to drop back. Our house that we were in was flooding during the race. 2 days in a row, it went up this much water. So very interesting, but it doesn't change things. I still look forward to the Carolina Cup. Still one of my favorites. Such a great meetup. We talk a lot about the community and stand up. And so you started together. Kayak was the first date. Did you see somebody else doing it, or you hear about it? I mean, it sounds like you did so many water sports. Or what got you hooked on SUP?
Go ahead, Alice.
Well, I mean, I got hooked on SUP because he got hooked on SUP. I actually, looking at it, I was not sure I was going to like it. I was like, oh, that doesn't look like it's good for your back. And but once he started getting into it and then going to the races, and that's what happened. I went to the Carolina Cup with him, and I was like, oh, I need to be out there. What am I doing as a spectator? So that's what got me into it, seeing the love and excitement that he had around it, and the community. We absolutely love the community. It's some of our best friends, don't live locally, but we see them regularly at the races.
Yeah, super fun. Yeah, and I know, I mean, you both, I think, are on flying fish boards. That's a whole nother family within the family, and all kinds of cool stuff like that. Did you start the race that you hold there? Is that something you guys got started, or did you take over?
Yeah, so there've been a few races intermittently in prior years down here. We did have a few races with kayaks. Actually, one that circumnavigated Hilton Head. So the first 18 miles were a race, and then the remainder of 16 were just for fun, so to speak. But kind of petered out, and so as I got more involved and interested in this stand-up paddling, I kind of came back and said, we really need to have a race down here. We've got such great waterway. A lot of people don't realize Hilton Head's our second largest barrier island on the coast, so there's just a ton of areas where you can potentially go to paddle. And it was a little apparent that if I didn't do it, it wasn't really going to happen. So I decided to bring the race down, and ever since then it's been great. We've got more of a team to help out now with the process. I think it's been a good event. The first year we had to cancel within a week because of a hurricane. Still had, I think, 75 people come, and then the next year and last year we had, I think, about 150 paddlers. So it's been great.
Yeah. So do you have a date set for the next one?
Right, it's September 10th.
Okay, great. So put that on your calendar. That'd be a great reason to go to South Carolina, to Hilton Head. Awesome. So we do want to talk a lot about health. So we'll get back to more sub stuff and some of your favorites where you might want to go, things you want to try. But first, let's talk about your backgrounds. You have some similarities, but also have branched off in different directions. Sports medicine, exercise physiology. You both have the physical side of it, definitely. And then I know you are a doctor and have a practice. And Alice, you are a coach and work with, both the exercise and the nutrition and everything. So I think there's just so many kind of tips and tricks and ideas we might get from you. But John, I've been talking to you about, and I'm excited that you're going to maybe put together something about, now that you have practiced this and been involved in water sports and work with both pain and sports in terms of being a doctor. It is time to like start looking, we're a young sport, and some of the injuries we had, I've been racing for 12 years now. Some of the early ones, we had giant paddles and they were really long and we were just messing up our shoulders. We learned some just by doing, which isn't necessarily the best, but now I think there's a little more research and thought behind why we do things. So staying healthy in the holidays, setting New Year's goals, we can look at a lot of different things, but why don't you start just a little bit about John, why don't you start with your background, and you work with athletes and sports and stuff, and how stand-up paddling fits into that and what you've done.
Right. So my initial training was with sports medicine and from a primary care standpoint. So it's a very broad area to particularly kind of practice, and there's a lot of different ways to go. My private practice is more seeing patients like us that might come in with injury or older patients that are dealing with arthritis, a lot of back care, back pain. And so I still see a lot of younger kids, and part of sports medicine in many cases is being out there in the field and seeing what happens. So, and a lot of Friday nights I'm at football games looking on the field at anything that's going on. I'm also a volunteer with the U.S. ski and snowboard team. So I've been over to Finland and Italy with the high jumpers and the Nordic combined team. So, part of it is if you understand, if many of us are athletes, and if you understand, what goes into being an athlete and what's involved with an injury and the rehab process, hopefully you can diagnose things quick, get the athlete into the right hands and help them along the way, minimizing their time off from sport, because for some of them, it's their job, so to speak. For some of us, just a real enjoyment mentally and physically after work, but obviously very important to try to minimize downtime and improve our health. But it also allows us, if we're out there in the field. So if we look at stand-up paddling, for example, going around that Carolina Cup course in those conditions, I know what I'm facing, and so it's kind of interesting. I'm not just standing there and seeing them leave and come back. I know that, well, you might hit your head on the on the bridge. So, I wouldn't think about concussion necessarily with stand-up paddling.
No.
But that's a thought, and also just hypothermia is a potential concern. And just like this year at Chattajack, the opposite, heat illness was a potential concern because it started out really cold, but everyone was dressed pretty warm. By the time we finished, it was really pretty hot, and some people were actually a little dehydrated, I think. So going through the process of the races and actually living it out a little bit, I think that adds a good perspective as a sports doctor, trying to convey kind of good tips to other athletes who are doing the same.
Yeah, fantastic. And Alice, nutrition, hydration, that was kind of just mentioned by John, but how that all plays into our physical performance and everything is huge.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
What's your story? Like, how did you get where you are?
I think as an athlete and, with my degrees in college, I was always interested in exercise science and nutrition for personal reasons, just what's the best method for myself. And I think the same, principles that apply to all sports apply to stand-up paddleboarding. If you're doing ultra endurance events, you want to make sure you're staying hydrated, that you're adequately fueled, so you have plenty of energy throughout the race. And sometimes that can be a challenge because, we don't want to stop paddling. So making sure you have that hydration pack on and easily accessible, and, especially for races like Chattajack that are so long. And, but even for the shorter races, John and I were just talking about how, a lot of people don't have hydration, and he can talk about that a little bit more, but they don't feel like they need to take it, but really it's so important because we're sweating a lot. It's a vigorous sport, and it uses, your entire body. So, but yeah, adequate fuel and hydration. And then also we've been looking a lot at anti-inflammatory foods, like reducing inflammation in your diet, which will help reduce inflammation in your gut and also in your body. And that can be really valuable for recovery, as well as just, fueling yourself for performance in a more healthy way. So, but we ascribe to the 80-20, we believe that there's times to enjoy your food and maybe indulge a little bit. But for the most part, we do really think about, hey, we're fueling for our performance.
Yeah. And just for optimal health over,
Yes.
I mean, the way you guys eat and everything. I mean, an athlete should want to be healthy all the time, and they're eating, or 80% of the time. I like that 80-20, especially right now as we head into Christmas, and I will be eating more candy. I'm not a candy person, but there will be See's candy tomorrow, and I will have some.
Oh yeah, yes, I remember that from California. I think too the just keeping our immune system strong, especially at this time.
Right now.
So that's really valuable too.
Super valuable. Well, I know there's lots of different points to touch on. Like, why don't we start with hydration? And that's really interesting because people I've talked to, it seems like it used to be, if the race is an hour and a half or 2 hours, then you need hydration. And I've heard that has moved down and down and down. And then you, I've learned a lot later in racing about hydrating far ahead of time, that it's not during the race, and it's that, things like that. What are some hydration thoughts and tips?
Yeah, maybe I'll talk about just some concepts, and then Alice can talk about the fluids that you might like. So just a little test last night, I did a run and then a bike, and I weighed myself before and weighed myself after, and looked at how much I drank during that time. And in that hour and 15 minutes, I lost over 50. I would have to replace over 50 ounces of fluid. So it's a lot, and that was training inside. So I think, I've heard some folks say, I'm not going to wear hydration. I'm just going out for an hour. I'm kind of training my body to deal with being dehydrated a little bit. And our bodies don't get acclimatized to dehydration. We can acclimatize to heat, and we can acclimatize to altitude.
Oh, interesting.
With hydration, you got to be hydrated. So our bodies have lower performance. You have lower mental acuity. Your muscles don't work as well. Your endurance is not as good. And the more that you're a seasoned or elite level athlete, you actually sweat more. And so you actually need more fluid than when you were a novice paddler, for example. So I think that's an important takeaway that I do a lot now. I rarely paddle if I don't have hydration on. One, you get to how it feels on you. It's not going to be foreign on race day. And two, just making sure everything works, because if you do something different on race day versus on all your training days, that's not optimal. I know for my first Carolina Cup, I threw the pack on. I'd never worn it before. I had the going underneath my arm. And of course, it never worked. And so those 13 miles, there was no hydration at all. So that's not optimal. And so I think for a lot of us, one, it's just healthier overall. As if a race director, I want to see people drinking so that they're not coming in passing out at the finish line because they've got heat illness. But two, as a competitor and just being healthy, you want to stay hydrated. There's nothing good about being dehydrated. So I think, one easy thing folks can do is just weigh themselves in a typical practice, for an hour. Weigh yourself before and weigh yourself after, and see how many pounds you lost. And for every 1 pound, it's 16 ounces of fluid. So
wow, yeah,
it's surprising how much, if you look at like Rafa Nadal out there playing tennis, man, he probably loses 5 pounds an hour, I think. So I think for a lot of us who are out there, especially in a warmer climate, you really do lose a lot of fluids.
Super interesting. Learned a lot right there, that we don't acclimate to hydration, that the better we get at this, we probably sweat more and need more.
Right.
So let's all wear our hydration packs. I like that. Some more tips, Alice, about what people might put in the packs?
Yeah, I think, if you're going on a shorter paddle, probably water is just fine. But, making sure, especially in the heat, getting proper electrolytes, and there's so many out there that are awesome. I currently, well, actually for 3 years now, I've been using beetroot juice, which I love. Beetroot has some electrolytes in it, but it also is a natural vasodilator. So it helps boost your circulation, and so that's nice. It gives you a little boost, and I can feel a difference. I've had a lot of athletes that use it that can feel a difference. So, and then on the longer races, of course, we want to have maybe a little bit of carbohydrate in there as well. I know John uses it all the time because he trains like a madman, and so he's sweating a lot more than I am, and he's burning a lot more calories. So he puts in some or some fuel, carbohydrate fuel like Gatorade, Powerade. There's a lot of them out there. The less processed, the less food coloring, the better. But, anything that gives you some good, simple, easy to use carbohydrates.
Great. Have you guys, it's okay to throw out brands. I'm not attached to any of them. Like, what did I use when I did Chattajack? Tailwind, because somebody had suggested it. But that was really interesting to me. I had never done a real long race, so I hadn't really done learned about that you need calories too. It's not just about all the electrolytes and the other things that you're losing from sweating, but that you need nutrition, and you don't always, some people like the chew or the goo or that kind of thing, but putting it in your water makes a lot of sense. Are there some others out there that you guys have tried that you've liked? Or
Go ahead, John.
I just think it's a lot of personal preference with that, because I know, with paddling, you can kind of tolerate a fair amount on a race like that. So you can even have a bar that's broken up and chew on that while you're tracking somebody. So, Alice wouldn't want to do that, but that's something to do. But, I've been out there with, I remember Bart, and the first Chattajack had a banana sitting on his deck, and he'd periodically bite a piece of his banana off. So I think there's a lot of different ways to do that. And you just have to kind of practice a few times on your longer paddle if it's that type of a race that you're doing. But definitely having a little bit more than just carbohydrate in your fuel is going to be important for that long of a race. And I think I'm a little more prone, I think, to cramping. So I add a little bit of salt with anything I'm doing.
Good point. And like you said, there's a lot to know about your own body that makes it slightly different for people. But I know one thing coaches say is, don't, just like you threw your pack on that first time and didn't know how the pack works, don't use something in a big race for the first time. Definitely try it out in your practices before and make sure it sits well.
I was going to say that, like, the last thing you want to do, you want to drink something that tastes good to you so that you do drink. So I have a brand that I work for called Purium that has great high quality ingredients. Like you said, Tailwind is good. I also like those Noon tablets, but make sure you like it and make sure that your body is okay with it. You don't want to have gastric distress when you're out there, and some of those ultra endurance fuels can mess with your stomach. And the last thing you want to do is try that in Chattajack and have issues in that respect. So so
it's great. It's great that there's people like you who know a lot. I think there's more information, there's more to know, but that's not a bad thing. And I love that there's so much attention on like clean ingredients and making sure and then what the ingredients are and if they work for you and for your body. So all good stuff with hydration. Any thoughts on, I've just heard different things, like or is it maybe it's personal preference, how often you drink, like especially for people who don't feel the need or sip water, like is it every 10 minutes? Is it every mile? Is it?
Yeah, I think, the best thing to do, like I said, would be if you want to look at a typical race, a 10K, where you might be going over the course of an hour, hour and a half, like that. And then, do a practice paddle and see how much hydration you lose, and just say, okay, well, I need to try to replace maybe 70% of that at least, so I'm not getting too dehydrated through that race, because you're not stay totally hydrated during that time. That's a little unrealistic. But I like having my pack on for the shorter races because I'll really load up before the race starts. I know I might not grab the hose right away, but at 20 minutes, once you're settled into the race a little bit, and then trying to do something every 20 minutes, I think is a good goal that I've had. But the nice thing is if you can somewhat get an idea how much you're losing in a typical hours period of time, you kind of know roughly what you should try to keep up with.
Great test for everyone to try out on their own. Yeah, love it.
Yeah, and I think if you're getting up early, like making sure 2 to 3 hours prior to it, you at least have like 16 ounces or so, and then maybe 15 or 30 minutes before, 15 to 20 minutes, you want to have at least 8 ounces kind of prior to the race. So you're already, because sometimes when we wake up early for a race, we might not drink a lot, or we might drink coffee, and that's a little bit dehydrating. So just making sure before the race, like he said, that you're adequately preparing yourself. And then every 15 to 20 minutes, I agree. And then the post race or post workout, making sure you replace all the water for every pound you lost.
Great tips. Fantastic.
So try to keep it really simple, really simple. I mean, peanut butter and jelly and, just banana, things like that morning of. I think as much as you can control so that you're not, worried about what's going on and your body's accustomed to that. And if you usually drink a cup of coffee so you're not going to be prone to a headache, things like that. So just try to keep it really, on track that your body's accustomed to.
Consistency, that's really important. Yeah, my favorite, because I don't like the consistency of goo, a friend of mine mashes up honey, banana, and peanut butter and makes it, and I love those things. And so that was a great kind of mash up, easy to digest, easy to swallow, that I didn't have to chew a lot, that I used in a distance race. So keep it simple, keep it consistent. General health is super important. If you want to be a good athlete, you already mentioned, Alice, things like anti-inflammatory and immune boosting kinds of foods and things. But I know, and also on the physical side, John, there's probably preventative type things we can do with stretching, that kind of thing. So maybe let's talk a little bit about something that applies to probably everyone, which is just eating a little better. Some tips that work into those things.
Go ahead, Alice. This is all your thing.
Well, eating better, I think both of us are primarily plant-based, and I don't think that's necessary, but I think, part of the reason we is we are all about anti-inflammatory nutrition. And so getting off processed food. So even if you're eating, meats and stuff, trying to eat organic, trying to eat clean, things that don't have a lot of hormones or chemicals or toxins, because that can lead to a lot of inflammation in your gut. And inflammation in your gut, we're learning more and more, can contribute to all kinds of negative health impacts. So I could talk for an hour about that, but of course we don't want to do that. But I think, just trying to eat clean, trying to eat fresh, and trying to avoid any kind of processed packaged things is what we're doing with our diet. And we've seen some really good results because we're getting older, and having those, we can't train like we used to without a few aches and pains. And so I think that also the other thing is like having a good sound fitness program as well as your nutrition and recovery. And I think both of us have worked with coaches. And even though I'm a coach, it's nice to have someone else, outside, especially who specializes in stand-up paddleboarding, kind of give me some sort of a program and framework to follow, so that I'm not just kind of blindly overtraining or undertraining. I have a system in place, and also, making sure you get enough sleep and you're doing some foam rolling and some stretching and things like that to aid in your recovery process.
Yeah, well, that's a very good point. You are a coach, and I think sometimes people forget about the coaching part that's not just the on the water part, because there's a lot more to it to being a successful athlete. And we know in our sport, there's a lot of us, I believe I'm older than you two, but that are, loving doing this and hope to do it for decades to come. But there are issues. I think I shared with you, I just had a major surgery, and it was very interesting to me getting a new hip. I had I take all these anti-inflammatory supplements and all because I have osteoarthritis, and they made me stop all of them. And they said, well, your blood, we need you not to have thin blood for this surgery, but afterwards you can go back to them. So it was interesting, like things that I didn't know, that my anti-inflammatory diet and the things that I was taking and my, fish oils and different supplements was also doing some other good things for me too. So it's definitely, so many things go hand in hand to being healthy. And what I'm doing, what's crazy for me right now is I can't exercise majorly. I'm doing these exercises to get my leg working, but I haven't figured out, they haven't told me any cardio I'm allowed to do. And that part's driving me crazy, but need to work on it. I need a coach.
Well, maybe you can swim. Swimming would be good, probably.
Yes.
What do you
as soon
think,
as
John?
the stitches are healed up, I'm hoping that will back to swimming.
Yeah.
I was also a college swimmer many decades ago, so I should get back to swimming. It's been a while. John, in terms of prevention and preparation and just having your body ready, like physically, and whether it's specific to paddling or just any sport, like, do you have some suggestions, some tips for people?
Well, from a nutrition standpoint, I think, like Alice said, there's a lot of research and studies coming in showing the more we can reduce levels of inflammation in the body, and our GI tract, our gut is a major source of influx of potential good or bad. So I do think, especially as we all are getting older and starting to see some inflammation build, things like arthritis, or for some folks diabetes, or cancer, Alzheimer's, all these major diseases that we face as we age, they're all inflammatory in nature. And so the idea with kind of an anti-inflammatory nutrition plan is hopefully you're really putting good fuel in, you're fertilizing your yard, so good substances, good nutrition. So I do think that I was kind of interested in a plant-based nutrition plan just because I treat a lot of patients with arthritis, and I had been telling them more and more, it looks like this is a good way to lower levels of inflammation, because they're all looking for ways to do it without drugs and without shots, and hopefully postponing surgeries, not having to have surgeries if possible, things like that. So, there's not a lot of preventative strategies beyond trying to just be as healthy as you can. So, and part of that is good nutrition and then trying to maintain healthy weight for patients. So all this was kind of coming together about 2 years ago. I was pushing for COVID starting, and we happened to be at home more for that period of time. And I watched that movie, Game Changers, where they documented the athletes that went plant-based. And, I think just kind of in a little bit of a rut with my paddling. I just felt like I wasn't making any gains. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it and test it for my patients and see how it does for me. And I really feel like it's helped a lot. I feel like it's improved my recovery time, and I still have injuries that come up, but they don't seem to nag me quite as long. So just from a personal standpoint, that's been a good shift for me. It's not like I had a really unhealthy diet before that, but I just fine-tuned it a little bit. And I think that's a strategy I use with patients too. I know Alice does it as well, just trying to, kind of make little adjustments, nothing too drastic. But that was something that worked for me and has helped a few patients, I think, just be a little healthier overall.
Good stuff. How about in terms of our stroke and our technique, or what we're doing when we're out on the water? Are there things that you noticed people do, maybe habits that end up leading to injury, or?
Yeah, so that's, it's an interesting thing to go through a sport development while you're doing it, because if you look back at something like football, it's like, how could they ever have played with no pads? And I'm sure in future years they'll look back and say, how in the world were they paddling with this paddle way up here? It's just one of these things that we're living through it. And it's just an interesting thing, especially being a physician, looking at it saying, well, yeah, it makes sense. We should lower our paddle. And it makes sense. We should try to get low to the water potentially as we make these boards narrower and narrower. So there's all these little things that I think do factor into potential injury prevention, and we just don't know. There's no real science. It's somewhat intuitive on things, but we don't necessarily have a direct kind of this we have to do for injury prevention. We don't have that yet, but it does make sense with some things like I know I've done it myself, try to get the paddle as low as we can, and trying to be a bit more in a squatted position rather than really hunching forward too much. So there is at least one good study out there out of Australia. They have a water research lab at Bond University, and so they surveyed stand-up paddling athletes, and I think they had 40 athletes in this study, and they did show that the shoulder was the number one injury, the low back, and the elbow were the other two that were kind of high on the list. And the associations were with a little older age, so paddlers that were over 40, so we're all in that category. And also those that were doing more endurance paddling, and we're kind of in that category too. A lot of us are paddling more and more miles each year. So I know I've gone through each of those injuries with my personal paddling career, and so you can kind of see why with certain things, and hopefully now as we change our equipment, hopefully we see those injuries shift a little bit and get lower in incidence.
Yeah. Do you recommend trying to do cross training or working out in some way, maybe to make something stronger? That I know that we talk about how paddling uses certain muscles, even though it uses so many, it definitely pulls you kind of forward, and what you do to like pull back.
Yeah, Alice can speak to this. I think she's being a PSCS, she knows all this stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, for every sport, training is task specific. You definitely want to make sure you prioritize the paddling so that you maximize your potential as a paddler. But cross training, and every athlete, I think every elite athlete does some sort of cross training just to give those muscles and those movement patterns a break, and maybe, like you said, open up your chest as opposed to always hunching forward. And circuit, or like Paddle Monster. I'm sorry, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay. Paddle
Somebody
Monster
tried to call. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, it's okay. Paddle Monster is one of those platforms that has like a good, all different levels of coaching. But there's a lot of coaching programs out there where they give you, the strength and conditioning portion. They'll even help you with nutrition, and they'll give you the workouts for paddling. And often they will also suggest the cross training. So I think getting some direction from somebody who, an expert, is not a bad idea. Even if you're just starting out, or there's all kinds of paddling camps you can go to where you can learn from people, where you can get a lot of ideas without having to hire a coach, that you can then go and do yourself when you're training at home. So I highly recommend that, getting expert advice and making a sound program so you don't overtrain, or you don't spend too much time in the weight room. Could also be detrimental, or doing the wrong types of weight training, like a cross training type of program probably isn't going to work for most people. Some body types might thrive on that, but for the most part, you might end up with more injuries doing something like that, especially training for an endurance sport.
Good points.
I think cross training is super important as we get older. I know for me, going through a couple of those injuries, like my elbow was killing me for a little while with paddleboarding, but I was able to surf ski, and so I think, I want to be on the water as much as I can. And so it's nice to have a little variability with what you're doing. And even if it's shifting from a paddleboard to OC1, that's a little less resistance, because I think paddleboarding, it's not an efficient sport. I mean, if you're going into wind or into current, it is not efficient at all. So every time you go out, it's a very taxing event for your body. And so I think, like nowadays, if it's like a really big moon like we had at Carolina Cup and the tide is just ripping, I'm like, man, I'll sit in the surf ski. I don't know that I want to stress myself out with the paddleboard. I don't mind doing a downwinder, but man, going into the current and that's a lot for your body. So I think just having that variability is good for you. It allows me to be on the water, and that's good for your, you learn a lot no matter what boat you're in.
Yeah.
But it also is something that is not too stressful for your body to do. And I think, you had, I know Jimmy Terrell on the other day, and saw some of his interview, and I was thinking, for some elite level paddlers, I know the quick blade paddles fairly well, but for some elite level, you may have two different paddles where you have one that's real grippy for your shorter races or your sprint race. Things are a little bit more hectic, and you want a good catch no matter if you're off a little bit on your stroke. But for a longer endurance event, you might want something that's a little less grabby, so it's just not quite so taxing to your body. So there's a lot to do with both your training and your equipment potentially to try to help if you got a little injury, or if you're just trying to. For me right now, I'm not paddling a real grabby paddle in the off season. I'm sticking to something that's a little lighter for me.
Good points. It's not, equipment's another great one to consider and think about and put into your list of things to stay healthy. So any other tips? What did we not touch on in terms of health and wellness with paddling?
I think, it's important too to point out paddling is very healthy. I mean, there are at least a few studies out there that show it can improve. Even over the course of like a 6-week period, there was a study where they just intervened 1 hour, 3 days a week with participants, and they showed aerobic improvements, anaerobic strength improvements, their well-being, their mental well-being was improved. So I think, and their balance also. So there's some really good benefits to stand-up paddling, and I think moving forward as a sport, it's probably a good idea to really push that. More so than necessarily, hey, you got to come do this for racing. Because like for me, it was very good going from a fit, I got on a paddleboard. I was like, man, this is a great workout. I love it. And so I did that years before I went and jumped at Carolina Cup. So I think for a lot of people who are into, the CrossFit and the mountain biking and all these things that are, just good workouts, especially now with COVID, trying to do things outside of a gym as much as you can. Paddleboarding is great, and I think it's a little bit more accessible with the improved inflatable boards and potentially your paddles that are the take apart paddles,
3-piece, travel paddles. They have,
all these things that are just making it a little bit easier for folks who aren't necessarily right on the water or don't have that easy. It's a great avenue for fitness. So you complement some running or biking, paddleboarding, and you got the whole thing covered.
Yeah. Very good point. We do have a great sport, and I know it's my mental break wellness, as much as anything. It's just, I look forward to it so much. And as you mentioned, it can be any craft really, but stand-up paddling really is accessible in a lot of ways. And we saw that huge, it wasn't expected at the beginning of COVID, but the growth of the outdoor world, but including water, bikes, other things, was huge. And so we have this whole new group of people who have found love of the outdoors and love of water. And that will hopefully snowball into them being lifelong paddlers.
Right.
So,
I was just going to add on to that. You're just the mental aspect of it, like being outside. There's so much evidence now that being out in nature is just good for mental health. And, so I think that's a real positive about being out on the water. It's peaceful and it's soothing. And so some days when maybe you're not training really hard, you can really have that moment of peace and just being in nature, which is just awesome to be able to do that in your sport. And I think the only other thing we didn't talk about very much in terms of health and the sport is just making sure you have adequate recovery and good sleep, good stress reduction. I mean, for us, being outside on the water is great for reducing stress, but also, other ways of like meditation and yoga and stretching and foam rolling and those kind of things are also very important, I think, for the whole athlete.
Great. Yeah, excellent tips. Well, let's talk more about you guys and your time paddling. You are in the Carolinas, and we talked about the Carolina Cup race and then the OluKai Lowcountry Boil that you guys put on. Have you paddled other places? Do you aspire to travel? Are there places you'd love to paddle?
Yeah,
let John answer that one.
So I think, we've been very busy, I think, just personally, so we haven't ventured out too far. But we've got a great series in the Southeast, the Southern Soak Paddle Series. So we've tried to compete in a lot of those races. And I really enjoy just going to some of these lakes that are in the middle of nowhere. And it's just, I don't know, from going to the hustle bustle of seeing patients and being a tourist destination just to going to a quiet lake is just very pleasing sometimes. But even if it's just a flat water grind of a race. But I think the probably most memorable one I had was that sea paddle race around Manhattan. I mean, that was just an amazing, just to get to the right race site with our car, board on the car. And I mean, I don't like walking in New York, let alone driving with a paddleboard in New York. So it was pretty nuts.
Yeah. Oh, that's a major accomplishment on, like you said, on so many levels. Just the idea of being in Manhattan on an island, trying to find where you start.
I know we went up the East River first. For me, it was very stressful. It was very loud. And there was a lot of stuff sticking out of the water that looked like it could, pierce your eye very easily. And so when we finally turned into the Harlem River, it just got so quiet, and it was really cool. And then got a little rough again on the Hudson. But anyway, it just is, I look at the sport and think, man, it's pretty amazing. I've been up to Canada and paddled with Larry and his crew, and then paddle around Key West and paddle around Manhattan. I mean, it's cool that I would never do these things. You never would say, let's go paddle around, Manhattan. So it's kind of neat what the sport does in terms of giving you these potential challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, community challenges, destinations have all been a big part for me and why I still love doing this. How about you, Alice? Have you thought of like a Tahiti or some blue water you want to paddle on? Or
Yeah, I always want to paddle in warm areas, with the exception, and I love Chattajack. Chattajack is my favorite personally. And I've done the Key West, which was interesting. But I think I want to do the gorge. I know that John wants to go there. I'd really rather kiteboard in the gorge, but I just want to go paddle there. Maybe not when it's crazy conditions, if there is such a thing. And
you come for a week and you do both. Because Hood River, Oregon is a wind capital. Such a great town.
Yeah, I think that's a dream spot for both of us. And then, anywhere tropical, I'll take anywhere where it's warm and blue waters. That's my favorite. I love going down to Florida where the flying fish are, and Seychelles, and paddling with her. She's amazing. So yeah, to me, it's a little more social still too. I love all the paddlers that we get to be with, especially at the races.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing? We mention it too often, but we laugh about, is it a catch-22? Do good people come to the water and paddle, or does paddling make people into good people? Because it sure seems like we have a very high percentage of great people in the paddling world.
Yeah, I agree. I think it totally feeds on itself. I think, when you just, I don't know, the people that we're around, I think they're just incredible. And I think also just how amazing it is that I get into a sport and, to get to know Larry Kane and Tommy Budai and Michael Booth and Seychelles and Ken Barnes, all these people who are just tremendous athletes, and to be able to just message someone like that, you could never do that in any other sport. You could never, just say, hey, Tiger, what should I do out of this?
You don't have his number?
Right.
Yeah, no. I mean, so kind and accessible and open. Yeah, we're very, very lucky. I mean, sometimes I have been in races and I think I'm kind of starstruck, but no, they're just, they strike, I'm just a normal person.
It was funny to say, the first Carolina Cup, I'd never drafted, I'd never downwinded. I was a fit paddler, but I'd never raced really. So, I mean, it was crazy. And so the backside of the island, I kind of figured out quickly I had to do this draft stuff. So I'm in the draft thing and I'm just zigzagging all over the place. I could tell someone was aggravated behind me. So I started kind of telling me what to do. Look, you got to do this, got to do this, got to do that. And I didn't really know who it was, but after the fact, I saw in pictures it was Jimmy Terrell. And so at least I was a quick
A,
place
a
paddle.
strong paddler, but there is a lot of skill to that, isn't there,
Right.
with drafting?
Right.
So that first time you went, you did the graveyard right off the bat?
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a,
Alice is shaking her head. Crazy man you're married to. Can you say there's a favorite part of stand-up paddling for you? I know you do a lot of water sports and kiting and kayaking. What is it about stand-up that you especially love?
I think just the great workout at first. I really liked it. I just felt like when I finished, I was like, man, that was great. I hadn't felt that before with a lot of like just the kayak and whatnot. And I still don't really feel that in surf ski, but with paddleboarding, I feel like, man, this is a really good exercise. And even the studies show that have looked at, they profiled the, the paddlers who are elite level in our sport, and they're have similar body compositions to those that are elite level canoeists, Olympic level canoeists. So, I mean, it's a good sport to get in great shape. So that part I really loved. And I'm always been kind of a loner. I've had 5 siblings, but they're much, much older. So I always like things by myself. So to get out and just be able to kind of get my mind off of work and get up in the marsh. And nowadays I'm do a lot of trash cleanups, and I never saw the stuff sitting in a kayak, but now I see it. So it's so neat that you see good things and you can see the bad things that you need to kind of work on, like with the trash and all that. So all that I think I just love about it.
The workout and perspective. Yeah. Same, Alice, or do you have anything else about something?
Yeah, I think it's the same. I'm also an individual sport athlete, like with swimming. And it's so awesome with swimming, you don't see anything. It's very boring. So just being out in nature, it's just so beautiful. And I love that part of it. And also, I think I was an avid runner for years, and it just kind of was tearing my body up. And so I love that I can do these intense workouts without having to run. Like I'm getting a great workout outside, which I love, and without the pounding on my body that running was doing. So I love it for that too.
I was explaining to someone who hadn't paddled that we're in he said, I think it's the right thing to do, in a squat, basically. Like you really are using your lower body, because they said, it's so much your upper body. I said, well, when people start paddling, they do just use their arms, but that's not that. We want to use our large muscles. What are the balance proprioceptor muscles? Is that what the balance muscles are called? Supposedly there's just all kinds of things firing, right, while we're doing it.
Yeah, it's truly a full body, and especially if you get those legs engaged and your core, it gets everything, much like swimming. I mean, in a different way. So it's a full body workout, and your balance, like John had even mentioned that earlier. It's really great for all those proprioceptors, and which is going to help us as we get older, prevent falls and things like that we don't really think about. So.
Yeah, no. But great to hear. And again, as more studies come up, and that's really interesting, John, that there was only one main study in Australia. Hopefully will start to have more of those. And that would be an interesting study, just because the population, we do have a older population in this. And, I have a couple guy friends who are in their 70s now. And here in California, they have a platinum is the name of it. They have masters, senior masters, golden masters, platinum. But acknowledging all those decades and that people can keep paddling, how fantastic. When we see a lot of crossover too. You mentioned running, nothing against running, but a lot of those impact sports where people have injured themselves, especially lower body, they're able to find something they can still do, if they love being that athlete and being out there in that workout.
Yeah, I think as we kind of move forward as a sport, it's kind of interesting to look at it that, you have a lot of us that kind of in the 40s and 50s that kind of get into the sport looking for something a little different. And so it's not necessarily in some cases that stand-up paddling could cause an injury to that crowd. I mean, a lot of injuries through the years, like a shoulder injury, that stand-up paddling might highlight a little bit. So, I think overall the sport is safe, but then you also look at the young kids who are doing it. I know Carolina Cup, there were a number of kids who are in their teens and 20s maybe. And if we want to have a sport that's healthy for many years, you have to try to optimize and say, okay, well, how long can you paddle every year. I mean, how much time do you take off in an off season? We don't really have that, but that's where I think sports medicine can get involved. And, you know, you look at injury surveillance and start to see associations with higher, you know, hours on the water with injuries, and what's that balance like. We have some of that information for, you know, little league pitchers, for example. We know they shouldn't pitch for 3 months out of the year. And so, if, you know, it's something that be great to start to see come from the sport evolving as you gain this information of how much training is safe. And, you know, should we take 2 months off from paddling every year? That'd be tough to do for a lot of us. But maybe we shift and, you know, for a couple months out of the year, do something a little different that's not taxing.
Oh, super good point. And yeah, John, I encourage you and hope that you will continue to encourage these discussions and help lead the way in that and have even more information. And you also, Alice, and what you're doing and your coaching and everything. So you kiteboard and you do like wind sports. Have you guys tried some of the new offshoots, foiling, winging?
Yeah, I'm hooked.
Oh, okay.
It's
silly question, huh?
If it's windy, I'm not getting on a paddleboard.
Although if you do go to the gorge, I think you're going to find that something special. It's a really unique to race up river with the wind behind you, forming those waves and surf up the river.
I went in high school and in college when I was really into windsurfing. So I loved it then, and I think that's definitely, we hope to try to do that this year. But it's really neat because it's interesting. Like, I've seen a couple great spots when I paddleboard. Never been able to windsurf, but I can go on a thing with a foil. So it's kind of neat that I've found these spots that are really like kind of neat flat water where the kind of funnels through at times, and I would have never really known that without paddleboarding. But now I paddle there, I want to try to sing there. So
I do. You mentioned perspective, and I think it's such a discovery being a smaller craft. It's really cool. Some of the places that we've managed to go, seeing the good and the bad, like you said. I think the trash that you see is kind of being at that perspective, but also more than a kayak, you can see into the water. And that's, come out to Southern California, you know, it looks so different underwater here. I love what, you know, the manatees and what you see in Florida with some of my friends who have excellent pictures. But here we have just a whole different color and kelp underwater and little sharks that aren't dangerous, but freak everybody out. But yeah, what a joy to be able to be part of the water community, whatever it is that we're out doing. Thank you for your wonderful tips, good information. Hope everybody we'll make sure and post them. We have that Facebook group. This does get recorded. So it's immediately on Supconnect's IGTV, and then it will be on their YouTube and my YouTube, KT Outside, within a couple days. Thank you for doing this right before Christmas and the holidays. I know it's a busy, busy time, but a great time to get some thoughts, and hopefully it has people thinking about what their new year will look like. Maybe going to your event, September, early mid-September.
September 10th.
Right.
Sorry, I was going to remember that. But thanks for all you do in our community. You guys are great people, and we're lucky to have you as part of it. Keep paddling. Have a safe, wonderful holiday. Hopefully we'll get through these strange times, and 2022 will be a little bit more normal year than the last year and a half.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen, for having us. Supconnect for putting all this together. It's great.
Yeah, good fun.
Yeah.
Really
Happy
enjoyed our
holidays.
conversation. Take care. Happy holidays, everybody. Thanks, everybody listening. See some familiar names down there and some hellos to you. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.